co-founder of the Projecto. Together with the MIS Barrientos Mexican American Cultural Center, we're thrilled to have Irma as our guest in our Spanglish series. This is a program dedicated to champion Latinx excellence and inspire our communities into action. Irma is a certified sex educator in Texas and client service manager at Jane's Due Process, where she helps Texas minors exercise their reproductive right to an abortion. Her focus is to connect the harm of sex-negative anti-abortion rhetoric into a wider sex-positive reproductive justice framework where marginalized people are shamed and robbed of their autonomy. She believes that when Black, Indigenous, and other people of color experience pleasure on their own terms, it's an act of protest, but most importantly, self-care. Thank you so much for being with us, Irma, tonight. Please tell us a little bit about your story. ¿Cuándo decidiste que querías dedicar tu vida a este tipo de trabajo?
Gracias por tenerme. Crecí, bueno, primero tengo que hablar sobre cómo crecí y todo eso para poder llegar al punto de por qué decidí hacer esto. Crecí con una combinación de realidades. Por primero, era un hogar evangélico con una cultura conservativa, en una familia de clase trabajadora y con estatus mixto. Y por último, en un vecindario con pocos recursos y alta vigilancia de la policía. Entonces, todo eso me hizo la persona que soy ahora. Porque siempre tuve una chispa por todo lo que no era tradicional. Y con eso siempre me sentía some type of way cuando me decían que las señoritas no pueden hacer eso o las señoritas no pueden sentarse así o estar o estar allá, cosas así. Pero no tenía el lenguaje para poder describir lo que estaba sintiendo. Y con eso creció un resentimiento porque a veces se le subía el sexismo y la misoginia a mi padrastro o la misoginia internalizada a mi mamá. Entonces, todo eso fue algo que muchas mujeres en el mundo sufrimos y de ahí cuando ya fui a la Universidad de Texas aquí en Austin, decidí en especializarme en los estudios de mujeres y género, Women's and Gender Studies, y con eso pude crear un marco de teoría para poder saber lo que estaba pasando, para poder poner y unir las piezas sobre por qué familias y comunidades se comportan de una manera específica o creen ciertas cosas y todo eso decide cómo nosotros vamos a hacer como adultos. Y entonces después de graduarme trabajé en los derechos reproductivos y ahí fue donde veía cómo la falta de educación sexual estaba oprimiendo nuestras familias y nuestras comunidades porque no poder controlar nuestros cuerpos es algo que es opresivo y también algo que es un abuso de nuestra autonomía. Entonces, yo creo que cuando las personas tienen información, esto es un poder que nadie les puede quitar.
Exacto. Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Mexico and Catholic, so it's kind of the same. I was in Catholic school, like all girls growing up. So everything, like ladies should do this, ladies shouldn't do that, and everything. It's super, like you don't only have like the police, you have like everyone, like your family, your friends, like the nuns, policing your body and how you behave and how you should react to these things and how you shouldn't be curious about these other things. And like everything is super polarized instead of a discussion, like everything's wrong or what are you doing or how, blah, blah, blah. Like I totally relate. And that does either, I believe, like two things, like make you very angry and just you're frustrated about that, or you just become complacent and like you just take it as the like those are the rules that we have to follow and I won't question that. And both of them are basically terrible.
Yeah, it affects our mental health, our psyche, the way we navigate the world. It affects pretty much everything. And for folks who, I usually do get a little bit of both sides, where some folks tell me, yeah, it's affected me. And then others tell me, well, all of that helped me be a good person so that I could find a husband and I could be respected and all of that. So at the end of the day, like, yeah, autonomy, like you do what you want with your body, how you want to navigate the world. But we cannot pretend that these stigmas are oppressive and shaming. And then shame in and of itself is a tool that can exile people out of communities, out of love, out of family, out of connection. And as you may know, like as humans, we are people who need other people. We thrive in community. It's important to always remember that the idea of being independent has colonized roots. So it's really not possible to be independent in this world, especially in a capitalist world. So in order to be liberated any type of way, mentally, sexually, emotionally, whatever you want, you do need your community. And if you don't have a community that is safe or that is not shaming you about how you present yourself to the world, then where else do you go?
Yeah. Yeah, and also like that makes you like think that you're wrong, and like that brings another set of layers of guilt and being not happy with who you are for just random things that shouldn't be there.
Yes.
Yeah, and I actually really wanted to talk to you for a while. I've been following your account for some time, and it's always very, very informative and fun. And again, like me being Catholic and having all this stigmas that, I mean, I'm working on them, but they're somewhere there still. Like it's very important for me that it's something like almost like light, like easily digestible information that just won't just break all the things at once. It's just like little by little approaching. And I thought like this is a perfect moment to hear about your work and the work that you do with your other job, Jane's Due Process. Because yeah, like we are in a kind of revolutionary mode, and we're fighting every day, both COVID and civil rights and well, all this, yeah, just basically the right to live and be like live in peace, kind of. So yeah, I wanted to please get some input from you, like how can we approach this? How can we take care of ourselves and through sex and through a community, like do better and with our mental health?
Yeah. So self-care in and of itself is such an important concept that can be life-saving, life-enriching, and an act of resistance. So before we get into like how to self-care, it's important to know where the concept of self-care came from. It crossed into the mainstream in 2016 during election season. And you can just imagine why, because what candidate was running. But it was originally a medical concept that encompassed everything that includes lifestyle, nutrition, hygiene, environmental factors, socioeconomic factors, medication, all of those things, which talks about how all of those factors are important to thrive in the current world that we live in. It's not enough to just be able to have shelter or just to be able to have a paycheck. Like, you need more. You need access. You need collective care. You do need access to so many things. And a lot of folks don't realize that, like, there are so many intersections when it comes to self-care. It's not just bubbles in a bathtub with wine, which is great.
Sure.
But coming from a survival standpoint, where most people, especially in America, are just surviving paycheck by paycheck, self-care incorporates a lot more, and especially the things that we can easily access. And one of those things being pleasure. So the concept of self-care became political in the during the women's liberation and civil rights movements. And again, you can just imagine why, because those were such big movements, just as revolutionary as what we're seeing today, that talked about, like, okay, we're doing all of this work for a new future, but we also need to take care of ourselves. But we are also teaching our community that, like, for example, in the women's liberation movement, self-care was introduced for when women went to doctors to talk about their reproductive health. But at the time, doctors didn't just see women by themselves or with their doctor or without their husbands, or they weren't allowed to get birth control if they were not married. There were so many layers to how women could access reproductive and sexual health care in that time. And then in the civil rights movement, self-care was introduced, how the basics in life are so needed. For example, food, shelter, environmental factors. And the Black Panthers were the ones who introduced the basics of, like, how all of that is so important in the world, because they were the ones who introduced the WIC program by giving kids in their neighborhoods free breakfast, because a lot of folks weren't even able to get breakfast at home, and just the little necessities were so important to alleviate the stress from the parents in order for them to keep going and keep pushing through their everyday lives of survival. So being able to reclaim that bodily autonomy against sexism and racism in the healthcare industry was so important, and that is why, like, self-care was introduced that way. So while self-care helps us recharge, many don't realize that their sexual wellness is also a part of that should also be a part of that self-care routine. For sexual wellness, you need several things as well, not just sex toys, which are great as well. But it starts with the basics, again, such as having shelter, having sleep, food, hygiene, all of that. Because if you are not taking care of here, like in your mind, nothing's gonna happen down there in your genitals, and you're not gonna have the desire to do anything. So you can't access pleasure when the basics in your life are not taken care of. And then you go to the physiological needs. Do you have healthy relationships? Do you feel like you have a sense of belonging? Do you have emotional and sexual intimacy? Are your boundaries respected? All of those things are part of the sexual wellness hierarchy. Are you able to prioritize your health in case you have an infection or anything like that? And then lastly, you're able to focus on the self-soothing or self-fulfillment needs that include masturbation and getting to explore different sex toys. All of that helps bring everything together when it comes to sexual wellness and self-care. especially during these revolutionary moments that we're experiencing, because caring for oneself is vital. And like I said earlier, also an act of resistance.
Yeah, sorry, I gave you like the most loaded question ever.
No, that's
Yes, everything.
I love that question, because how can we access pleasure, joy, and liberation if we're not taking care of ourselves?
Yeah, and I've said how you say like people of color like can use pleasure as a weapon, and I was like, oh my god, it makes so much sense. And at the same time, like, yes, but how? Like, yeah, I get it, but at the same time, like, I'm not well versed. I'm not like, yeah. I mean, every being happy, being successful, and in this times, like it is like some. It takes guts. It takes so much more than other groups. So yeah, like I get it. It's being happy. It's the best way to break boundaries and to grow, but that requires a whole lot of community and self-discovery and stuff.
Yeah, because if we're too tired due to our day-to-day survival, like when our body is on survival mode due to our day-to-day needs, requirements, whatever, we're going to be too tired to experience pleasure, to experience joy. And if we cannot experience any of those things, that in and of itself is already oppressive. And when we can experience them, we are, it's an act of protest, it's an act of resistance, letting the world know that like we, like people of color, Black, Indigenous people of color, we deserve joy just as much. And even if it's like the most basic thing, if we want to get McDonald's or if we want to get some Jordans, I know that there's a lot of talk about, I see it all the time on Twitter, how like we talk against when poor people want to treat themselves to a pair of shoes, but that's frowned upon because it's something that like, no, if you can't afford those shoes, don't buy them. Okay, cool. But like these shoes, or not buying that Starbucks, or not buying avocado toast every day is not going to get me generational wealth.
Yep. And who's to say like that wealthy people deserve like to be happy or joy, and like people that don't have access to wealth, like, oh no, to bad luck. Let's see you in the next life. Like, come on, like whatever.
Exactly. And joy and pleasure, it can be anything you want it to be. Like when I talk about pleasure, it doesn't necessarily mean masturbation or anything sexual. It can mean whatever you want it to be. Ultimately, it's something that we want to get to in our sexual life. We want to experience pleasure in our sexual lives. But some folks need to take it slower than others, where we work our way to being able to explore our bodies, because there's already so much shame. And I've suggested to so many people, if looking at your genitals is still like something that you can't get to just yet, start off by just telling yourself yes, that you deserve pleasure by whatever brings you joy. If eating a cupcake brings you joy, but you're always refraining yourself from eating that cupcake because of what society says that beauty standards are supposed to be, or like how bodies are supposed to look like, eat that cupcake, because that's going to make you happy. And then little by little, you're going to just practice telling yourself yes to pleasure, to the point that you're like, okay, I want to explore my body. What is all of this fuss about that my body can give me pleasure? Okay, well, let's see what the fuss is all about.
I like that. Yeah, it's a whole process. Y de nuevo, como te decía, de que con lo católico y la culpa y toda la información negativa hacia el placer y qué significa el sexo y cómo tienes que guardarte para estas cosas y estas situaciones, ¿nos puedes decir herramientas aparte de eso de explorar placer? ¿Cómo romper estigmas? ¿Cómo romper like the thing that they say, like, I don't know if this is the same for everybody, but in Latino communities, it's very common that if you're like in a gathering and there are men like you're like, go and change clothes or go and do that. And instead of telling the creepy guy, like, dude, behave yourself around the girls or whatever, like, it's, I guess the intention is to protect the girls, but at the same time, it's so messed up and it's so misplaced. Like, do you have any tips on how to break those stigmas and that, like, that education that we've been getting since we, like, especially women, but no, men have it, just the inverse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, to your point, like what's going on is that there's this this pejorative warning of like, we want to protect the women in our families, the girls in our families from child abuse, sexual abuse, whatever. But it's also half shaming that it's not intentional, but it's happening. And again, whenever shame is introduced into the equation, it does so much to our psyche that we don't realize it until we are adults sitting across a therapist, which is not bad. Everyone please go see a therapist. But like, we won't realize we have all of this trauma like internalized until we're like adults, older, and we're like, whoa. So like, I want to wear these short shorts, but for some reason I feel some type of way because when was the first time that I was told that short shorts were bad or that young women are not supposed to wear short shorts? Or like if a girl wears shorts or skirts above the knee, it's seen as que son como unas cualquieras or something like that, you know? So going back to all of that, and it all takes us back to our childhood, to like how we were parented. But I love your question of stigmas. I prepared my answer in Spanish.
Sí,
So,
por favor.
los estigmas nos afectan como nos vemos a nosotros mismos, nuestra sexualidad y cómo navegamos el mundo. Y algunos ejemplos de los estigmas que tenemos en la cultura, es la cultura de la pureza, purity culture, for everyone that I'm sure is aware of. El complejo de, excuse my language, it's called the Madonna whore complex, y en español es el complejo de la puta y la Madonna, que quiere decir que it's attached to slut shaming, where like Madonna complex is seen as the virgin, the women who are respectable, and then the whore / puta complex is the ones who are not seen as respectable, the ones that we slut shame in society, the ones
and
that...
there's those two other, like, nomás son esas dos opciones. There's no one in the middle.
It's a dichotomy, like you fit one or the other, and you can be both sometimes too, because one day you can be respected and then you go to a different community and the culture is 100% different, and then you're seen as a completely different person. For example, in our like in less shaming environments, I have found that like in Latin communities, wearing certain dresses or like wearing makeup is actually part of our culture. Like women like to look cute. But then when we go into a white community, the purity, like respectable like idea is really ingrained in white women. So like they wouldn't wear as much makeup or anything because it's seen as like too much, or like you don't want to be looked as like a hoe or anything like that. So it definitely varies by community as well, which is super important to point out, because that is why there is this double standard for women of color, where we are sexualized outside of our communities by the white male gaze, and then we are also shamed in our communities due to toxic masculinity within the men in our own communities. So like, and the internalized misogyny within the women in our own community, our moms, our aunts, all of them telling us like, you're supposed to act a certain way. And they're ahí andan hablando que like, oh, you're doing this, you're doing that. Oh, ya viste lo que hizo Irma, yeah, yeah, lo que hicieron allá, oh, mira lo que está puesto, stuff like that. So like women of color, we get it from both ways, which is
Sí.
something that is so important to point out because it will affect us incredibly. So otros ejemplos de los estigmas son como la cultura de rape culture. With what you were saying earlier about how young girls in our communities have been told so many times, like, vete a cambiar porque ya van a venir tus tíos o tus primos, ya vienen hombres a la casa, tienes que ir a cambiarte. Without people realizing that is feeding into rape culture. That is letting men know, okay, it is okay to continue behaving a certain way because the girls are going to just get, like, women are continuously being told how to behave in order to accommodate the male gaze, how to accommodate rape culture, versus the other way around where we cannot destruct and abolish that culture. And in order to do that, we need to put the men front and center. And the first herramienta es hablar con los hombres, que los hombres tienen que estar primero y en el centro, hablando de esta epidemia también, hablando de rape culture y hablando y holding each other accountable for their own, like their own actions. Es importante hablar sobre cómo podemos luchar contra esos estigmas como mujeres, pero primero debido al patriarcado. That's a mouthful.
That's a full, yeah.
Es la responsabilidad de los hombres, like cis men, hombres cis, deshacer el patriarcado. We didn't create this. Esas responsabilidades de ellos. No necesitamos a los hombres que estén diciéndonos, oh, I'm so sorry you went through that. Okay, diles a tus amigos, diles a tus familiares que son hombres que dejen de comportarse de esa manera en donde están hablando de las mujeres, shaming women for embracing their sexuality, and then also perpetuating rape culture by saying like, oh, women are not supposed to behave a certain way or act a certain way if they want to be respected. Las mujeres deben de ser respetadas como vengan, como sean. Si las mujeres están caminando en la calle desnudas, se deben el respeto. No nomás las mujeres que están vestidas modestas. Entonces, si los hombres primero no están, if they are not aware that they are benefiting from patriarchy, even the good men, even the good guys, incluyendo los hombres que dicen que son buenos, if they don't themselves hold themselves accountable, we're never going to get anywhere, because it's similar to what we're seeing right now to the whole police brutality. Like, if we cannot, like, we can do all of the education on racism and all of this that we want, but if the prison industrial complex, if the system of police is still present, we can't, like, abolish anything. It takes so many intersectionalities in order to make this happen. And the first and foremost has to be men holding each other accountable of their actions. So por primera, eso es lo primero, which is that was a pretty long response.
No, but it's perfect. Like, and it's just like crazy that a simple chat about sex, it has so many roots and tangents. And I was just thinking, like, and it comes back to all the race talks and the race, like, just the madness, for a lack of a better word, like this crazy thing that we're going through that people don't get, like the privilege, and like how they keep making it worse and longer, and it's just stupid. Anyway, but yeah, like one example that came to mind is I've had it that people, like very well-intentioned people and very nice people, come to me and tell me like, oh, I didn't like how so-and-so talked to you. And I'm like, I know, I was here. Like tell them, tell them
Exactly.
you're making the wrong thing. Like, it doesn't help me. Like, it actually makes me hurt to know that you notice that I've been humiliated, or that I've been, like, if you come and tell me like it's not helping me at all, you need to take care of your friends or your coworkers or your whatever, like, and handle your group.
Exactly. Exactly. And we're not going to be able to get anywhere when men are just covering for each other and just pretending that it's not a problem, pretending that they're good people. You can be one of the biggest things in my work, where I still work in reproductive rights, but it's also connected to sexual health and everything that deals with that, which also includes sexual assault. So with that, it's important, like what we always tell people is like, your abuser is not someone that is going to be hidden in an alley. It's usually someone that you already know. It's usually your partner. It's usually someone that's your friend. And they can be a good person. They may not hurt a fly, but they can perpetuate toxic masculinity like a mofo. They can still abuse you and not even realize that they're abusing you. They can commit assault against our bodies and not realize it or not care, because they're clinging to this idea that they are a good person, to goodness, where it's the basics. So I'm like, okay, well, I don't hit her. I don't cheat on her, so that's it. Excuse me, those are like the most basic, the most basic term of the humanist agreement between people, to not hit them, to not abuse them. Like, people can be abused verbally, emotionally, mentally, and we still, as a society, are not 100% versed in what consent means. We have to teach people every day what consent means. It's sad that even us as women, we don't realize that whenever we truly, just because we didn't necessarily, like, our body said yes, but in our minds we said no, we're like, well, technically it wasn't sexual assault because I was okay with it. But were you really? If you had one ounce of doubt that you really didn't want to be in a sexual situation, that is already sexual assault. If you said that you were tired, but you were like, I don't want to get him mad, F it, let's do it, that is sexual assault. Literally any little ounce of not wanting to do anything and something is done unto your body can be considered sexual assault. And again, this kind of like wraps us back around.
That's what I was just gonna say. Like, sí, todo lo que, de nuevo, que tus papás te enseñan de que tú tienes que respetar al Señor o a quien sea, y que tú tienes que ser modesta y tienes que cuidarte, y bueno, pues lo que quiera para que ellos estén a gusto. Tú puedes estar incómoda mientras no hagas problema, o mientras no hagas un escándalo. So yeah, like, we are taught that other people's convenience is more important than our own.
Exactamente. Y más herramientas de poder luchar contra esos estigmas. Por segunda sería volver a crearnos a nosotros mismos. Like, we have to reparent ourselves para poder decirnos, si nuestro cuerpo no quiere ser una cosa, está bien. Si no queremos hacer algo, si necesitamos words of affirmation, palabras de afirmaciones, give that to ourselves. Lo tercero sería tener curiosidad sobre lo que nos excita, y eso también involucra todo de lo que nos puede excitar sexual y no sexualmente. Porque cuando tenemos esas curiosidades, pero no las exploramos, no vamos a poder explorar nuestros cuerpos y nuestros deseos. Y de ahí va a poder reconocer el papel de la cultura. Cuando podemos reconocer con el papel que la cultura trabajó en nuestras vidas, like how we were internalized to believe that we're supposed to behave a certain way, or like our bodies are for like male pleasure or this and that, no vamos a poder tener esa liberación sexual. Otra cosa sería hacer el cambio del sexo performativo a poder tener experiencias sexuales placenteras.
Okay.
We as women do tend to perform in sex versus actually enjoy sex and like also include our pleasure, but that is just part of like what society has done to us, because it has always centered male pleasure and the male gaze. So like we'll wear lingerie, and maybe not everyone likes lingerie, but we're gonna wear lingerie because that is what men like. We're going to just be in this position because this is what he likes, but what about me? You know, poder cambiar es like poder movernos de esa del sexo performativo al sexo placentero. Y por final, aprender a comunicar nuestros deseos y nuestros límites, because eso sería lo que va a ser lo que nos va a ayudar a hablar sobre el consentimiento.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I've never thought of those things. That's so, thank you. Yeah. It's just crazy. Like, and it's so basic. Like, just love yourself and follow what you want to do and share it with others. It's pretty basic, but also hard.
Gosh, yes, exactly. I know that when, as women, whenever we go out on a date or something and we tell our friends, hey, like, oh my gosh, he was so attentive and he was asking me what I wanted. And it, like, sometimes it's like, I wish we didn't have to talk about this. I wish this was just natural. Like, oh, guess what? Like, I went on a date and it was great. And we would talk about each other's personalities and like our hobbies and stuff, versus, did you guess what? This man is actually attentive. He actually asked what I wanted as a woman. Like, where like the bar is low. It is on the floor.
100%. Yeah. But I think like we got this. We're in this place of re-educating ourselves in so many ways. And dude, we're doing it for everything else. Let's just keep adding like new things and things that will make us more wholesome and more happy. And yeah, I think like at work we've been working a lot with intentionality, and I think it goes back to it. Like if you're intentional while having sex, while communicating that you want something and that this is like it's of two people or yourself or however you want to do it. Like I don't judge like about the participants, but yeah, if we're all like present and intentional about this experience, like it should be okay. Yeah, cool. Good, thank you. Okay, and also I want you to tell me a little bit more about your job with Jane's due process. I know you do like crazy work there. Like it's so important in the community. I'm just shocked about all the work that you do and all the different facets or layers of it. Can you tell us about it?
Yeah. Jane's Due Process is a nonprofit that helps minors in Texas navigate the judicial bypass process to obtain an abortion. And so basically, if a young person who is not 18 in the state of Texas wants to get an abortion and does not want to involve their parents for whatever reason, whether they're not in her life or they will most likely be against it and will force them to continue the pregnancy. they call us, and I help them navigate that process by, okay, let's meet all of the requirements that Texas has for women to get an abortion, because to get an abortion in Texas for an adult is burdensome. You have to go through several appointments, and you have to meet certain requirements and all of this and all of these other things. So we have to help her meet those basic requirements, and then we have to help her prep to go to court, to talk to a judge in order for that judge to approve for this person who is not 18 to have an abortion. And in order to prove that, they have to meet they have to meet one or two things. Either they have to show that they are mature and well-informed, or that their life is in danger if they were to tell their parents. I always think that it's pretty funny when that first requirement of like, okay, they have to prove they're mature and well-informed, because you would think that like,
well, yeah, if you're not, you get a kid.
Exactly. And so I'm just like, who made these? Who wrote this? I need to talk to them. So basically, like, it is, the young people in Texas are literally at the whim of the government. Like, it is up to the government to decide what they get to do with their own body, which is pretty enraging, because yes, as like women already, like, our bodily autonomy is already controlled by the government, because we have to meet certain requirements in order to get an abortion. But essentially, we do not have to go ask a judge to give us permission, because like, if we can pay for it and if we have the resources to get to the clinic, okay, that's fine. That's all we need as adults. But if you're a minor, that is a whole other thing, because now the government is going to tell you, a judge is going to tell you if you can have an abortion or not, which is mind-blowing. But essentially, we cannot talk about sexual health, about bodily autonomy, about reproductive rights, if we are not talking about the reproductive rights of young people as well, because they are, like I said earlier, they are literally at the discretion of a judge to tell them if they can have an abortion or not. And if they cannot, and if they get denied, they have to find other ways to get an abortion. And that creates even more socioeconomic issues within themselves. Like, they have to figure out if they can go out of state and slip away from their parents. Y en la comunidad latina, el aborto es un tabú que es aún más grande que la sexualidad. Si uno tiene sexo cuando es menor de edad, ok, es una cosa, pero si quiere tener un aborto, eso ya es un problema de toda la familia. Entonces, no podemos, no debería depender del gobierno ni de los padres decidir qué hace un joven con su cuerpo, porque poder tener información y la opción es poder que todos deberían de tener. Entonces, poder tener información de nuestra sexualidad, poder tener información de que si yo quiero tener sexo, está bien. Y si si tengo un embarazo, tengo opciones de qué puedo hacer. Porque es importante saber que todo tiene riesgo en la vida, y eso incluye el sexo. Pero eso no quiere decir que no debemos de tener esa experiencia placentera. I always like to talk about how in sex ed, we always say safer sex versus safe sex. There is no such thing as safe sex. Because sex comes already with its risks, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, because when you ride a bike, it comes with risks. But that doesn't mean don't ride a bike, unless you like have a fear of riding bikes, then don't. But so instead, we always say safer sex is what you want to aim for. So it's rooted in harm reduction strategies. So basically saying like, if you want to have sex, go for it, but always remember the basics. Consent, if you truly want to. Know that your pleasure is important. Know that if you don't want to get pregnant, there are ways to reduce your chances of getting pregnant. It's important to know that sexually transmitted infections are the thing, and it's important to talk to your partner, and that's why communication is important in all of those things. Pero como no tenemos esas conversaciones con nuestros jóvenes, nadie sabe nada.
No. Y en las escuelas, at least here in Texas, it's crazy. Like, I think they only teach abstinence, basically, like, or
yeah, it's one of two, abstinence only or abstinence plus, and the abstinence plus only includes a certain amount, like just condoms as birth control. But like there's different curriculums, but ultimately it all should lead back to abstinence. So yeah, actually,
they're gonna do what they're gonna do. Like tell a kid not to do something, like good luck.
Exactly. And when we create this space of secrecy when it comes to sex, that's going to create a bigger curiosity to explore that. That's just the basics of being human. That's just the basic psychology of being human. Like when we are told no as humans, we're like, okay, it could go either way, where you have so much anxiety where you're like, you're not going to do it. But whenever you do get to that point of having sex, you're probably going to freeze, or you're probably going to feel a lot of shame, even if you do it in the correct context, such as being married and heterosexual sex and all of that. It's very common for women to feel shame even after getting married and having sex for the first time, because they were told their entire life that sex was something that is shameful. And then the other half is folks who end up deciding to have sex early and exploring that they are not aware of the risks involved either, and that their pleasure matters. Today, even, I spoke to one of our Janes, and she told me that she didn't know anything about birth control. She knew that birth control existed, but she didn't know anything else about it. And like, how can we like rectify that? Like, people are out here having sex, and like our young people are telling us, like, are showing us that they're having sex, but are telling us we don't know nothing about birth control though. And I'm just like,
oh, yeah, it's scary. And yeah, it adds up again because wealth and race and socioeconomic, it's just another layer of difficulties, and like another generation that is gonna struggle. And it just shocks me how deep this issue is and how it affects everything. Like it's
absolutely. Mm-hmm. And that's why it's so important to talk about.
yeah. Thanks again, because it's fun talking to you, and so informative. And I'm very grateful that you're taking this time to talk to us. Lastly, if you don't mind me asking, can you give us like some tips on cómo ayudamos, aparte de pedirle a los hombres de nuestra familia que se check in with themselves, like cómo ayudamos a nuestra familia a reaprender y a cambiar de opiniones y a liberarse, basically?
Mm-hmm. First and foremost, creating shame-free spaces at home. Everything starts at home. Of course, our sexuality is influenced by many different layers, such as the media, pharmaceutical companies, the government, religion, everything. But all of those things intersect at home. So creating shame-free spaces where young people can come to parents or the adults in their life to talk about these topics. And more often than not, if that space was never created, when it is introduced later on, many young people will retreat and be like, this is embarrassing, I don't want to talk to you about it. But unfortunately, if we were not talking about it when they were like 1 or like 3, once more understanding is present, it's going to be a little harder, but not impossible. The next would be supporting healthy exploration of our bodies as adults with one another, and including children. It's always important to remember, as parents, adults, caregivers, whomever, if you have any children that you're in charge of in your life, masturbation is completely normal, especially in babies, toddlers. That is when the beginning stages of exploring one's genitals happens. And mainly because young babies and toddlers are exploring their bodies, they're exploring the world. So anything and everything is going to catch their attention, including their genitals, because their hands are just everywhere. And who are we to say that masturbation doesn't feel good? So if we know it, we know that they know it, but it's not connected to something sexual in the brains of the little ones. They just know that it feels good. If they touch their arm and it feels good for them, okay, they're going to keep touching their arm. If they touch their genitals and that feels good for them, they're going to keep touching their genitals. That's it. Like, that should be the stopping point of our mentalities versus, no, this is gross, this is shameful, you shouldn't touch yourself, don't do that. Because then that is when the shame is introduced into that space, which again can lead us back to the rants that I had earlier. Discussing and asserting healthy boundaries is super important. Again, talking about consent starts at home, where for example, in la comunidad latina, we always kiss or hug when we say hi or goodbye. It's important to know that there are some people that don't like that, or are really not comfortable with touching or like having other people touch them. So like if they themselves do not want to hug other family members or kiss other family members, it is okay. But when we are telling them, no, you have to do that, we are already intruding into their bodily autonomy, and we're telling them you have to share your body, whether you like it or not. That's the rule. And when I've mentioned that, a lot of folks have never thought about it that way. And it's yeah, consent starts at home. And when we tell the little ones that they have to do something with their bodies, that creates the foundation that they have to please other people.
Yeah.
So if we're telling them that, well, then they're going to have this foundation later on in life with their first sexual experiences, that they have to please whoever they're sexually involved with, leaving their pleasure last. Then it goes on to respecting the autonomy of others. Like we were saying, if we see that people don't want to be hugged, kissed, touched, or whatever, we have to respect that. And that doesn't mean that it's something bad or that it speaks to our character. It's just that not everyone likes to have their personal space invaded, and that's okay. As humans, I think we need to learn how to accept no.
Yes, and it's so important. You never know if someone's giving this nasty vibe, or if, there's many reasons why no should be a valid answer.
Exactly. Y en la comunidad latina, como estábamos diciendo anteriormente, de que hay mucho trauma en nuestras comunidades when it comes to sexual assault. So if we are telling kids that they have to hug or kiss certain family members, we don't know which family members have crossed the line with our children. And so if we're forcing them to, and if our children haven't told us because of the shame that they're feeling, and we are forcing them to hug and kiss certain, all family members, they're going to have to hug and kiss their abusers every single time. And that in and of itself is adding to the trauma. Does that make
Claro.
sense?
Sí, 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 definitivamente.
So that's why like bodily autonomy, consent, all of that is so connected. And then being able to discuss accurate terms for all our bodies, we have to talk to our children and to each other. Like we have to say the names, like this is a vagina, this is a vulva, this is a penis, not, oh girl, he ate the punani. No, like these are like the correct terms, not euphemisms, because if we ourselves as adults cannot say the correct terms for our body parts, our kids are not going to be able to tell us if they were, if their body was assaulted or if someone touched their body, but because they don't have the correct terminology or the language to say that, they're not going to know. Challenging gender stereotypes, and then also creating the culture of consent in our culture. Creating the culture of consent in our homes. Talking openly about taboo subjects in our homes as well, such as porn and masturbation. We talked about masturbation earlier, but porn is also something that's happening in our homes. Like people are probably like, our kids are locking themselves up in the closet probably and watching porn. But if we don't tell them like, okay, it's important to know that this is not how real sex looks like. Porn is an entertainment tool versus sex ed. And if they don't know that, they're going to internalize everything that they see in pornography and believe that that is how they have to perform sex. And that is where that performative sex piece comes in. Because as adults, like I know that as someone who watches porn, and before I was able to unlearn all of that, I was like, okay, well, they look so cute, I want to do that. And I'm over here like pretending to moan and everything. I'm like, but nothing's happening. But that is but that's that piece of switching from performative to actually just experiencing pleasurable sex by being able to communicate our desires and being able to have that language to talk about our body parts and talk about our boundaries and our desires and all of that. But to end, I always like to end with the same thing: practicing self-compassion. We're not going to be able to be like this sexually liberated flower tomorrow. like we're not gonna probably be like out here sunbathing our vulvas in the sun tomorrow if we started today. It's not gonna happen. And if it does, yes, you go girl.
Good. But yeah,
for the most part, like more commonly than not, it's probably not going to happen, and that is okay. I know that as sex educators, we like to advocate a lot when it comes to masturbation, like explore your bodies, explore your bodies, explore your bodies. But it is okay if you do not want to, like if masturbation is not your thing either, because asexual people exist everywhere in our communities. And that means that there are people who actually don't find any type of pleasure when it comes to masturbation or penetrative sex or anything like that. Their pleasure comes in different ways, and it doesn't necessarily mean sexual activities or anything like that. So to be able to be inclusive of sexual liberation, we always have to talk about self-compassion and know that if you, again, cannot look at your genitals today, start by just telling yourself yes and that you deserve pleasure, and then just work your way slowly from there until you can feel that you are able to explore your body a little more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and I didn't think about that, but yeah, it's a whole other topic, the asexualism. I don't know if that's a word.
Yeah, asexuality.
Okay, yeah, that's another one, and it's as respectable and as valid, and yeah, good to know. Thank you. Yeah, it's so much good information, and another thing to add to fight for happiness and our pleasure and our joy, and just to charge batteries and keep on the good work.
Yes. Everyone charge your batteries.
Yes. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you to the MIS Barrientos Mexican American Cultural Center for co-presenting. I hope you have a lovely night. Explore, be nice to yourself, and good night.